The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Hey, thanks so much for joining us for today's show, which is being hosted by my friend Matt Sienkiewicz. I'm just dropping in to say hello and to say that I am excited because coming up next week, a new format for the show, and patrons will get a chance to see today what I've been working on for a little while. So they get the first look, as well as like daily content that's really dope. Behind the scenes and conversation with me and etc. Like just every single day, most of the part, I would say like 4 days out of 5, they're going to get video content from me. But today they get to look at the entire new look of the show and the format for the show. So if you want to be a part of that exclusive content, go to patreon.com/the BPD show and become a patron today. Matt, it's in your hands.
Today is Thursday, May 30th, and you're listening to The Benjamin Dixon Show. As you can probably tell, Ben is out, and I am in. I am Professor Matt Sienkiewicz, coming to you from Boston College, and I'm joined, as always, by the illustrious Max. How you doing, Max?
Good. I am glad to be back.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to get another opportunity to talk to Ben's audience. I've got big news for you, Max.
All right.
I tweeted this week.
How many times?
Just once.
Wow, nice.
Just once. But we talked about it last week, and then Ben retweeted it, so then it got like an unembarrassing number of likes.
Cool.
So if you want to,
proud of you.
Thanks, Max. I tried to not get too angry, but like a little angry, and it's. I'm like dipping a toe, right? Like I'm going. I don't want to freeze up. So just kind of going in slow. But if you want to see more of that tepid tweet action, you can follow me at Mediastudied, or where are you, Max?
I'm on Twitter at Maximillionaire.
So yeah, follow us, or if you're listening, let us know. We got some nice feedback last week. We could also take some less nice feedback if that's what you want to give us. We're tough, right?
Yeah,
relatively. All right. So what's on your mind, Max?
So, just as I was coming in today, seeing as you are the resident Jewish correspondent for the Benjamin Dixon Show, I thought I might ask you about like what the hell is going on in Israel at the moment. Benjamin Netanyahu called new elections. So, like, yeah, what does that actually mean? So
thanks for stereotyping me. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
That's all I am to you, Max. Isn't it? So it was a big deal. We had elections in the spring. The Israelis had an election in the spring, and Netanyahu won, but it's a parliamentary system. So he won by getting just the plurality of the seats, and only just barely that. Basically, how it works in the Israeli parliamentary system is there's 120 seats in what's called the Knesset, the meeting of the parliamentarians, and in order to form a government, you need to put together a block of 61 seats. 61 seats as to constitute a majority.
Right. So while Netanyahu was trying to put those parties together, there was like some kind of a disagreement that was going on?
Yeah, so it's an instructive disagreement, just to... you just kind of keep in mind the Israeli system, like many parliamentary systems, is really confusing. But also it's a good reminder that, you shouldn't think in black and white. You shouldn't think in binary. Basically, when people said that Netanyahu won, they meant, yes, he got the plurality of the seats, but he didn't get a majority. What they really meant is that the right-wing bloc, quote unquote, got 65 seats. And so they should have been able, in theory, to form a majority government. The issue, of course, is that, right and left are not just two distinct things, right? Inside of each of those groups, there's huge disagreements. Basically, long story short, what happens here is to get the majority, to get over 61, Netanyahu needed to put together a government that included both this party led by Avigdor Lieberman, who's this super hawkish, super secular, kind of awful Russian guy. It needed to include them, but it also needed to include a party called United Torah Judaism, which is a religious party. And so while they're both quote unquote right, they disagree on basically everything. I mean, with very few exceptions. Lieberman wanted to push a bill that would force religious school students, yeshiva students, into the military. At least in theory. The religious party didn't want that. And basically Netanyahu just couldn't get them to agree. And on the one hand, that seems strange because they're both on the right, but then as we know from here or anywhere else, there's a lot of ways to be right-wing. So basically what you have here is, like, let's say you had to form a party that included both Sam Harris and Jerry Falwell Jr. Like that, it's literally like the only thing they agree on is that they hate Arabs, right? They hate Muslims, right? It's the same thing. It actually maps on really nicely.
Yeah.
And so, you've got the secularist party who wants to make sure that the state is more secular. You've got the religious party that wants to ensure the particular rights of religious students and religious people. And so, basically, it's kind of all a game in some ways, because whether or not the law would have changed anything is a whole other question. Lieberman has proven that he likes to mess with things. He actually took down the previous government sort of in a chain reaction by leaving it. Long story short, Netanyahu couldn't put together a government, and they're going to have elections again.
So, yes or no, does this actually change anything?
Mostly no. So
Palestinians continue to suffer.
Palestinians continue to suffer, no question. I mean, there would be no movement there. The deal of the century doesn't have any.
Yeah, sorry, Jared Kushner
does not improve. There's another list of people I'd rather not bring up. But yes, Jared Kushner's not going to. It's not going to help anything in that sense. What is different? There are ways in which it can get much worse. In that, as bad as Netanyahu is, Lieberman's like that, but crazy, kind of. And he sort of is coming off looking very weirdly brave, even though he's not really doing anything difficult. If you think about it, it could change maybe what parties people vote for, but that's not going to convert somebody from like the right side of the aisle to the left very likely. So not very likely that'll matter. It's actually interesting. They could have theoretically done it in a way that somebody else from Netanyahu's party could have asked to form the government, but nobody was brave enough to step up. It's like, if you're going to strike the king, you better kill the king, right? Nobody actually trusts that Netanyahu's done, even though he's about to go under indictment, even though he just failed to form a government, even though, I mean, this could actually mess that timing up. So maybe Netanyahu gets hurt. It's possible. But yeah, no, it's not good for peace, not good for the Palestinians, not good for the Israeli left, which looks no less anemic after this. And, I mean, the numbers are not crazy. It's the 65 seats, but it's just out of 120. It's not like a huge majority, but it doesn't seem like a movable majority. So that's all a bummer. What else we have today, Max?
So coming up, we have What Blogs Are Saying with Josh Moss.
Everybody's favorite segment.
That's right. Everybody's favorite segment. And then finally, to wrap up the show, we have an interview with the Intercept's Murtaza Hussain. We're just talking about some potential conflict zones that exist, and Mike Pence may have been alluding to in a speech he gave earlier.
You want to hear an amazing theme song?
Play it.
What am I saying? I don't really know. I'm pretty busy and I don't know where to go to find them. But Matt's going to ask his friend Josh, and Josh is going to tell you about blogs. What blogs are saying with Josh Moss. Also with Max Thunder.
Three, two, and now I'm joined by two of my favorite guests for our recurring segment, What Blogs Are Saying with Josh Moss. First, I got to welcome on to the show Josh Moss, a comedian from New York. How you doing, Josh?
I'm doing all right. It's great to have you guys back.
Isn't it? And I'm also joined by Max Thunder. How you doing, Max?
Good. It is good to be back.
It is. All right, so I think it's time to open up the mailbag. Should we do it?
Yeah.
All right, let's get this one open. We got a question here. It's from Lindsay in Quincy, Massachusetts. And Lindsay asks, hey, Josh, what are blogs saying?
Hey, Lindsay. I am going to actually introduce a new segment quickly called Breaking Blogs, because there is a breaking blog news right before we went to tape here. Turns out the White House had asked that the USS John McCain not be in Trump's line of sight during his whole trip to Japan.
Wait. That the boat, the boat shouldn't be in sight.
Yes, sorry. The boat named after our president's arch nemesis.
I mean, because if it was John
war
McCain,
hero
that
John
would
McCain.
be that would be off-putting. But so the USS John
imagine
McCain.
you saw your nemesis's boat name on a boat as you were giving a speech.
If I saw my nemesis's name on a boat, if I had a nemesis if I were worthy of a boat-worthy nemesis, then nothing would upset me. But all right, so this begs the question then. All right, let me just get this in my head. So Trump's going to give a speech for left to its own devices. The USS John McCain would have been at the same locale, and
yes.
Okay, and then so is our blog saying that Trump was like, get that out of here, I don't want to see it, or are they saying that Mulvaney was like,
yes,
he can't handle it?
Assuming that the president said that and it wasn't Ben Carson.
Yeah, actually, Trump tweeted about this just a little while ago. He said, quote, "I was not informed about anything having to do with the Navy ship USS John S. McCain during my recent visit to Japan."
Okay, that is way too grammatical. That is not.
Actually, good point.
That is not sent. No, that is even worse. That is not sent by none of this was done by Trump. I'm completely convinced now, based on that tweet. The entire thing was Mulvaney or somebody told it to move, and then he went and stole his phone and forgot to put in weird capitalization.
More importantly, what this shows is that Trump is actually a fan of what blogs are saying.
That's true. He must have known we were recording. Okay, so blogs are saying that this is a petty thing and a huge waste of. I mean, it actually probably costs a lot of money just to needlessly move a boat, right? The fuel. I mean,
it's under construction in Japan, so presumably they had to.
Did they have to lift it? Everybody had to.
Who knows? But yeah, no easy task.
All right, so blogs are saying that's bad. What else are blogs saying, Josh?
Well, they to segue back into Trump in Japan, blogs are also they are talking a lot about his tweet where he said that he did not agree with Kim Jong-un that Joe Biden was a low IQ idiot, but that he had said that Joe Biden is a low IQ individual, and he said those are very different.
Wait. So Un said that Biden was a low IQ idiot, and Trump is saying he's a low IQ individual. I will put it to you: is the definition of an idiot not a low IQ individual?
Well, that's the technical definition, but much like words evolve, Matt, the words change. Lame used to mean you couldn't use a limb, and now it just means
now it's a bad podcast segment.
Yes.
So are you saying saying, if I'm getting it correct, you're saying that one can be a smart idiot in this context?
Well, no, I would actually say idiot has evolved into mostly you have to kind of be smart enough to be an idiot. So usually people say it like, "Oh, you're an idiot." You wouldn't say that to someone who actually had low IQ. That's very mean.
Well, are you saying that Trump wouldn't say something very mean? I mean, look, I get your point. You're saying that idiot has a sort of moral judgment kind of built into it, or it's like somebody who thinks they're smart but is an idiot. Whereas Kim Jong-un was. So I get it. So Kim Jong-un was sort of morally judging the vice president, and Trump was just calling him stupid. That's what we get from this.
Yeah.
All right. What are blogs saying about that?
Well, this is a true polarized blog incident. So you have one side, mainly the left, just admiring the tweet and thinking it's Fallon funny. That's pretty good.
Fallon funny,
That's a good tweet.
Just funny enough, right? Okay.
Yeah, it's funny enough to be on Fallon, so that's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And then the right is pretty upset because there's a unwritten rule, which was written recently, I presume, that you can't speak badly about our country or high-ranking individuals within our country when you're abroad.
Wait, you can't even though everything gets broadcast internationally, if you say it while you're abroad, that's worse somehow.
That is what a lot of people, such as Peter King, congressman from New York, he a staunch Trump supporter, but he came out against
But wait. So if King said this at like a bar in Staten Island, it would be totally fine. But the fact that he said it in Japan makes it not acceptable.
Well, I think that's definitely the key. I think if he had said it, on U.S. territory, if he had said it on the USS John McCain, ironically, it would have been okay. But unfortunately, that wasn't available to President Trump.
If only they could have found it. Oh man, you're right. Oh, foiled. What that might be irony. I'm gonna think about that later. All right. What else are blogs saying? Finish us up.
Staying within politics, they are a Twitter about Mitch McConnell at an event was asked if he would confirm a justice next year in an election year, and
he would never do that.
He said, "I think we would," and the whole audience erupted into laughter.
Okay, and so they're laughing. They're laughing at his hypocrisy. Is this the idea?
Well, they're laughing at his apparent hypocrisy, although I'm going to disagree, Lindsay. I'm going to disagree with what blogs are saying today, because I think that to actually be hypocritical, you have to be critical in some form, and that requires some value. And I don't think there was any truth. It was clearly such a political craven move. I don't think looking into it, I don't think it's worthy of hypocrisy.
So you're saying that because McConnell, when he did not confirm Merrick Garland, was so clearly just making up a rule, that the fact that he went back on that rule, like, yeah, technically that's hypocritical, but in reality it was just so apparent from the start that we should just not, it doesn't even count, it's like sub-hypocritical, is that what you're saying?
Yes, it's sub-hypocritical. For example, I think it's much more likely that Merrick Garland is at home laughing and cackling, as he's been since 2016, then he's upset saying, this is hypocritical. He cost me my dream job.
I think that's probably right. Right. So Garland is much more likely to he would find it ridiculous, but he's not like upset about it. Like, I don't believe that's not the real rule. Okay. Yeah, you sold me there.
For example, everyone is going to be texting Merrick, I'm so sorry. Did you see what McConnell said? And he's going to be like, it was amazing. It was crazy. It was so funny.
I thought we had a deal. Yeah. All right. That's good. All right. So, but blogs, you seem to be going anti-blog here. You think that blogs are sort of being like righteously indignant, when in fact that ship sailed so long ago. That USS John McCain sailed so long ago that they should not be upset.
Yeah, I just think they need to calm down and remember that Game of Thrones isn't coming back.
Yeah, that was a big.
They have to pick up their game.
That was a big hit for blogs, right? That was peak blog.
That's a big hit for a lot of people. There's a lot of blogs made their living off of Game of Thrones. That
is actually really interesting. That probably was a significant economic hit to any number of new media companies, right? Not having that, and in fact,
podcasts, YouTube channels,
the Ringer, right? And then I saw like the Ringer, like they were putting together like a what's the Big Little Lies, whatever, like just they're trying to like recreate the Game of Thrones after thing for a different show, which will not work. I mean, like. The viewership. Anyway, point being, you're right. Blogs are probably grumpy because Game of Thrones is over. A, they might not have liked the end, and B, now they got to like come up with something else to talk about, and they don't have the benefit of having Josh Moss come on. So, Josh, thanks so much, and we'll talk to you next time the segment rolls around.
All right, take care.
All right, so thanks to Josh for coming on and enlightening us. We're going to go to Murtaza Hussain in a moment, but Max, you want to set this up a little bit?
Yeah, so Mike Pence gave the graduation speech at West Point this year, just recently rather. And so he had some kind of curious lines in his speech that alluded to conflicts. So just a few quotes, and we talk about this speech quite a bit during this segment. Quote, some of you will fight against radical Islamic terrorists in Afghanistan and Iraq. Some of you will fight on the Korean Peninsula and in the Indo-Pacific, where North Korea continues to threaten peace, and increasingly militarized China challenges our presence in the region. Another section, quote, some of you will fight in Europe where an aggressive Russia seeks to redraw international boundaries by force, and some of you may even be called upon to serve in this hemisphere.
He's covering his bases.
That's right. I mean, he didn't leave anything out.
All right, let's see what Murtaza thinks. Now it's our pleasure to welcome onto the show Murtaza Hussain. Murtaza is a journalist for The Intercept, and it's a pleasure to have you on, Murtaza. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
So obviously, plenty to discuss in terms of foreign affairs, which is your area of expertise. One thing that's been intriguing me and Max, and well, intriguing is probably the wrong word, but something that we've been thinking about a lot lately is sort of the bellicosity of rhetoric that we're hearing out of the Trump administration, in particular. Well, there's Iran and sort of the heating up of some of that rhetoric. There's Pence giving this speech at West Point where he talked about he gave this long list of places where the cadets could soon be at war, and so we thought we'd bring you on and at least start by asking: Do you think we are moving towards war, be it in Iran, be it elsewhere? Where do you think we stand right now in terms of that future?
I don't think that Trump or Mike Pence or several people in the administration of high rank are looking for a war with Iran. I do think that there are certain people in the administration, such as John Bolton, who've made it a career goal of going to war with Iran, and now they're in the best position they've ever been in their lives to effectuate that. Having said that, I still find it very hard to believe that a war will happen because it's so obvious that it's a no-win scenario for the United States. And there is expected to be, and there has been, some pushback from military leaders, retired or current, because they'll be the ones bearing the brunt on the American side of any conflict. Having said that, I do think that there is a risk with the escalation of rhetoric, as you said, and general saber rattling, that a war could happen even if nobody wants one. And that's the danger right now as I see it. There could be an unintended escalation, and there could be miscommunication. And there were some reports that in the midst of all this recent heightened tensions, Iran had prepared countermeasures because they did think that they were going to be attacked. So that could have easily gotten out of hand.
So you said that Bolton, who has been famously interested in intervention in Iran, you said this is his best opportunity. Can you lay out for us, what makes this his potential chance to strike?
He's never held such a high rank in any administration, and he's the type of person who would not make it through confirmation processes in any role where he had to get to such a process. He is fortunate to be appointed to the current role by Trump, and he has a very high degree of influence on the administration's foreign policy compared to any role he's had in the past. So it's never going to be the circumstance again. It's all likelihood that John Bolton will be so close to levers of power at such a high level. And he's made no secret of his desires of going to war with Iran, or at least carrying out military strikes against Iran. And it's unlikely in the future that he'll be in such a role. So if it's going to be happen ever, it's going to be now. And that's why I expect him to push and do everything he can to make his dreams reality.
Yeah, and what are those tactics? In some ways this is sort of ugly speculative fiction, but I also think it's something we need to keep our eyes on. I mean, what are the signs that we're going to see? If Bolton or people like-minded to Bolton are trying to push us towards war, what should we be looking for? What are the signs going to be coming down the pike?
In this White House, it's very difficult to understand or correctly prognosticate any future policies because the messaging is so muddled and so much that happens seems to be, either it's ordered or it's proclaimed and it doesn't happen, or things which were never discussed in public before suddenly happen out of the blue. And we saw that, for instance, in Trump's decision to withdraw U.S. troops from Syria, which seemed to come again with no forewarning. And then a few weeks later, he not only backtracked in that decision, but he actually increased the number of troops in Syria. So it's really difficult to understand or to say with certainty what this administration is going to do at any moment of time. I really think that in the last few weeks we saw such heightened messaging and such intensified rhetoric that if a war was going to happen, we really seem to be on the brink of it. That immediate crisis seems to have passed, but there are talk of deploying more troops in the region as a message to Iran, and then there's again the risk of unintended escalation due to their presence there. There's a risk of escalation between Saudi Arabia and Iran, which could draw in the United States, or is very likely to draw in the United States. So it's very difficult to say, but I think that with this administration, generally speaking, circumstances which would lead to armed conflict are highly likely and much more so than they were with the previous administration.
Yeah, no, your description of the messaging is interesting, and I think pretty complicated insofar as that, of course, there is the bellicosity of rhetoric and sort of the increased language, but then there's the simple like inscrutability of these maneuvers, right? And the fact that it's so hard to discern a particular strategic sort of flow in the combination of things that we see Trump doing and that we see sort of in the interplay between him and his advisors or the military. You mentioned the possibility of misunderstanding. Where's the most vulnerable point for misunderstanding? Where do you think is the area where, the Iranians are most likely to perhaps misinterpret, or the Saudis or somebody else in terms of American tactics? Is there a particular area where we're sort of, you think, likely to offer a confusing message?
Well, as I alluded to earlier, during the most recent standoff, the Iranians began to take measures in the Persian Gulf in the sense of arming boats with missiles and putting them into a state of readiness, according to reports from the Wall Street Journal. This was interpreted by the United States as a preparation for aggression on the Iranians' part. But as we seem to have been reported, the Iranians were preparing for an attack that they felt was imminent from the United States. So this is the kind of thing that when lines of communication generally are not open, and there is all this rhetoric in public, the two sides it's very easy to misinterpret each other's actions and end up walking into a conflict that neither side had actually wanted or necessarily prepared for, but which simply became the logical, I shouldn't say logical, but the...
logical given sort of the mistaken understandings.
Sure.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Now, how does this kind of, it seems like with vis-a-vis North Korea, it's a rather different scenario in that it seems open lines of communication to some extent. Yet at the same time, we've got on the one hand, the president speaking nice about Kim, about quote unquote Chairman Kim, and at the same time, Mike Pence giving speeches where he alludes or sort of directly references the possibility of war with North Korea. How is the dynamic different there? Do you think it's safer? Or do you think that there's a similar sort of risk for misunderstanding? Or are we in a totally different ballpark as it relates to North Koreans?
I think North Korea benefits from the fact that they already have nuclear weapons. So the stance the United States takes to them is a lot more measured and restrained. And you also see this with the U.S. relationship with Pakistan. Because of the fact that Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons, the risk threshold from the American side is much less, so they can afford to be more aggressive. And the cost to them of having no channel of communication with the Iranians is, again, much less than it is to the Iranians. And there's not saying that the Iranians should get nuclear weapons. It's just that the dynamic of mutually assured destruction was very robust throughout the Cold War, and it continues to be robust dealing with smaller powers in the United States in the sense of avoiding direct armed conflict, because it's very clear that it's a no-win scenario, far more potentially disastrous than a no-win scenario with Iran could be. North Korea potentially could hit the west coast of the United States with nuclear warheads. So, the risk of miscalculation is much greater. That's why the United States makes a lot more effort to have some communications with North Korea and even to potentially diffuse the conflict there.
I mean, another issue, as you already alluded to, is this question of America's allies and the role that they may or may not be willing to play. What do you think is the sort of tolerance for pushing towards war out of, let's say, Saudi Arabia or Israel as it relates to Iran? Is there? I mean, should we be concerned that there are other interests in the region who have something to benefit from a military interaction?
I think Saudi Arabia would be very keen on U.S. airstrikes against Iran at the moment. They make no secret of their desire for that. Israel is a bit more complicated because if there is a war with Iran, there's a very high likelihood that there will be a knock-on conflict between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. And Israel does not want that conflict. And they will, because of Hezbollah and Iran's relationship, they may end up with that if there's an attack on Iran. So, and now that Saudi Arabia is so vocal about their own foreign policy desires, Israel can be more restrained in its public rhetoric as well. You also have to understand that there's a divergence between the military leadership and the political leadership in Israel. The military leadership and intelligence leadership tends to be what you could describe as more dovish than the politicians because they understand the security context and what the real risks are and are not, whereas political leaders tend to try to play up the population's fear for some electoral gain. So I think that there definitely is a push from Saudi Arabia and Israel, but there's nuances which are very important between the two. And I think that primarily you're seeing the calls for aggression mostly coming from Saudi and the other Gulf countries.
Should Venezuela come up in this discussion at all? Is there really any reason to think that the United States would be interested in militarily involving themselves? Again, in this Pence speech at West Point, he made a special note that there could be conflict in this hemisphere, which I think is fairly. It seems that it has to be interpreted as Venezuela, Cuba, maybe. I don't know where else would be plausible. Is there anything to that in your mind?
I think it would be very unlikely. Again, it's certainly possible. I saw Lindsey Graham recently in an interview comparing a potential intervention in Venezuela with the 1980s intervention in Grenada. And I think that would be a very spurious comparison. Venezuela is a much larger country. I think it's very clear that the U.S. is looking for the Venezuelan military to act on its own, to impose the political solution that they'd like to see in Venezuela. I think it's exceedingly unlikely to see a major U.S. intervention in Venezuela, although I could be wrong, but I don't see it as an imminent threat at the moment.
Yeah, no, I mean that seems right. Although, as you say, the messaging is so confusing in general. It's very hard to know what to base things on. Anywhere else in the world? Should we go to Australia, Antarctica? Anywhere else we should be worried about potential military hotspots? No is a good answer, by the way. Right? We just went over plenty.
In the short term, I don't think that anything beyond will be discussed, but. There are a lot of political changes happening in the world which could lead to conflicts in Eastern Europe. They could lead to conflicts with China in the South China Sea. Those could be very serious, and they could end up being a lot more serious than any other interventions in Iran or Venezuela because they would involve great powers. And I think as the political order, which we've been used to since the end of the Cold War, starts to change, the risk of those conflicts increases.
Well, thank you for the tour around the world. Very interesting, if not all that pleasant. How can people find you, Murtaza?
Yeah, you can find me at the Intercept. I publish articles there, and you can also find me on Twitter at My Twitter handle is MAZMHUSSAIN.
All right. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Murtaza.
Thanks, man.
And that's going to do it for today's episode of The Benjamin Dixon Show. I want to thank our guests, Josh Moss, Max Thunder, and Murtaza Hussain. Max, where can the audience hear Ben coming up?
So Ben will be taking over for David Pakman in this upcoming week. So tune in to the David Pakman Show to catch a bit more Benjamin Dixon content. All
right, you get Ben on the Pakman Show next week. Probably you get us on one of these, maybe. We'll see.
Who knows?
Let us know if you want one of those. Again, at Mediastudied, at Maximillionaire, and we will see you next time.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Thank you.